And we just spent the last 10 minutes reminiscing about old ice fests. And Barry has been up here at least a half a dozen times that we can remember, anyways. And so it's really good to have him come back. And he's going to be talking about a new book he's publishing, and it's The Calling 2. So if you haven't read The Calling 1, you need to get out there and read that. It's got a lot of stories, and if you've been coming to Ice Fest over the years, you'll recognize a lot of these people in Barry's stories. So it's a great book to pick up, and we look forward to The Calling 2, which comes out, I believe, in September 2022. Just a quick reminder, you've got 2 more days to get your American Alpine Club membership raffle receipt to us. All you have to do is email it to us that you paid for it. You get into a raffle for free registration for Michigan Ice Fest 2022. So yeah, we'll be doing that. And then the photo contest is also going on pretty much all season long. So we will turn it over to our dear friend Barry Blanchard, who is up in a cold Canada right now. So warm Michigan Ice Fest COVID welcome to Barry. And also, folks, go to our Facebook page and ask questions. Barry will be going there afterwards to answer them. So welcome, Barry, and great to see you again.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, great to be back. If not in person, in virtual time in this zooming world. So yeah, thanks for having me. And I last time I was at the Michigan Ice Fest was 2019 February, and I'm going to dedicate this reading from the manuscript of my second book to Jess Ross Kelly, who I was fortunate enough to work with. He and his dad, and I've known John for over 40 years and Jess since she was a teenager. And we were out a little farther. I forget the name of the climb, but what I can't not forget was the wind coming off Superior. And it was, extreme gale force, whatever you want to call it. It was hard to stand on top of this ice climb. And I remember being out there, and Jess and I set up an anchor, or there was an anchor there set up for us. So we're thinking of lowering our guests over and let them climb up this ice climb. But first we got to check it out ourselves, and we can barely stand. And it's blowing a gale. And Jess, as he's getting ready to go over the edge, he looks at me and he shouts, "This place is great training for Patagonia." I lower him down. He comes climbing up, and there's chunks of ice, coming up on the wind, and it's a little loony, actually. And he gets up, and Jess just always had a great sense of humor all the time. Yeah, he loved to laugh, and he loved to make people laugh. He looks at me, gets over the top, and he goes, "Man, I had it wrong. Patagonia is great training for this place." So just a great memory of Jess. And then, I had total hip surgery at the end of February, total hip replacement. So when he showed up in late March to go climbing with Hans-Jörg Auer and David Lama, we talked over the phone. I really, unfortunately, couldn't give him, a take on the snowpack around here because I just hadn't been out. I had a cane. So, and I didn't get to see him that last time in Canmore, which is a bit of a bummer. But yeah, this reading is going to be for Jess. So I'm going to share the screen now and bring up the slides that I've put together to go with what I'm going to read. And the first person you're going to see here is Johnny Blitz at the Columbia Ice Field. A little more recent picture of Blitz, but not terribly recent, actually. And in 2001, Johnny Blitz and Steve House and Rolando Garibaldi showed up at my house in Canmore, Alberta. We're outside the door this morning. It was minus 33 degrees Celsius, which is pretty darn cold on the Fahrenheit scale too. it's been great for the ice climbing. I think I haven't done any yet this year because I had shoulder surgery at the end of October. Don't get old, man. It's like you become a late model with high mileage and you got to replace the parts to keep you on the road or get into the shop to get repaired. And yeah, no one's going to buy you. So I guess there isn't a lot of option. Um, so anyways, yeah, these three gentlemen showed up at my place in Canmore and we were going to go alpine climbing, but conditions weren't perfect. So we started up doing some ice climbing at the Columbia Ice Field. And Steve House at that time was kind of on fire to be an alpinist, which he always was. And he, of course, became probably the best alpinist to come out of North America, possibly ever. And yeah, so we did some ice climbing and Steve was a little like, I didn't come up here to ice climb. I want to do some alpine climbing. So yeah, we were retreating from the Columbia Ice Field. Steve was going to go home. Rolando and Blitz and I stayed up for one more day to do a bit more climbing. And yeah, I came back to Canmore and Steve's car was in my driveway. And Blitz had a great comment at that point, and he said, this is going to be interesting. What's happened? So before Steve left the Columbia Ice Fields, where the four of us were crammed into one Scotty's style size motel room. So the place was rich with the odor of athletics and duffel bags and, you know, some beer kicking around. And I told him about this line on the east face of Mount Fay that one of the younger climbers had told me about. There was the buzz about this linear strip of ice that had formed for the first time that anyone could remember on the east face of Mount Fay. So I said, man, go check out that line on Fay and, you know, let us know if that's where we should be going. And yeah, we showed up at the house and there was Steve and he checked out the line. So that's part of the story here. And setting the cast of characters, Steve House here after one of the ice climbs we've done, and then Rolando Garibaldi doing what they do well, which is eating. And I'll mention before I go too much further that I put on a backdrop so you guys didn't have to see my unfinished basement behind me. But my nickname is Bubba, for those who don't know. And this is a Bubba Clips. A Bubba Eclipse. I amuse myself. So this is back in behind Mount Temple, very close to the Valley of the Ten Peaks. But in this picture, this will be coming into the story, the east face of Mount Babel, quite a challenging rock climb. A climb called Gimme Shelter, a very challenging ice climb with the threat of a serac over top, so a calving edge of a glacier. And we're actually going to go in the back here. And I think I'll start reading now. Take a shot of my Session IPA to help my throat. And this is the Michigan Ice Fest. Cheers. Okay, so we start off in the story here. I think it's February 2001, February or March. And we have Steve in my house in Canmore in the condo. I just couldn't drive all the way back to Mazama with at least taking a look at the jewel. The young guys had described this line as the crown jewel of the Canadian Rockies that winter season. So I drove up to the ski hill and walked out onto the deck, and I wasn't expecting much. Then I saw it. It is bloody awesome. My hands were shaking with excitement. I had to rest my binoculars on the deck rail to steady them. There were all these skiers around me, drinking beer and smoking, and there I was, hunkered down between them, shaking and scoping and trying to steady my hands. We have to try it. I've already been to the hardware store and bought fuel and sleds to haul our packs in on. Downer was that Blitz had to go back to work landing jets. Apparently anyone can fly them. Hell, they fly themselves. So it was only Rollo, Farmbo, and I that drove away at 6 a.m. to the Moraine Lake Road. A rusted out 4WD camper capped pickup truck sat in the parking lot, emanating to us all the threat of a guardian bull buffalo. We immediately concluded that it belonged to Eamon and Raphael and that they were ahead of us scooping the jewel. Rollo peered in the windows and saw water bottles and the ice climbing guidebook, definitely climbers. Steve placed his hand over the hood to feel for heat, cold, way ahead of us. We lashed our packs to the yellow kiddie sleds and began skiing. The 12 miles into Consolation Valley consumed a number of hours, and we fretted over the twin ski tracks ahead of us. Maybe it's not Raph and Aben. Maybe it's a party on Gimme Shelter, a 300-meter grade 6 water ice 7 in the same valley, I said. Farther on, Farm Boy said, it takes a lot to succeed on a route like this first go. Maybe they're failing. Hell, I wouldn't even mind doing the second ascent. It's such a cool line. Towards the end of the road, we caught sight of the jewel, and it was a perfect glittering plumb line brazed to a flat black alpine wall. Kamisi's drop of water frozen in time. And for folks who don't know who Emilio Camisi was, he was a climber in the Dolomites, and he described his philosophy of the Directissima as let a drop of water fall from the summit, and that's where I shall climb. And here's our drop of water frozen in time. Yeah, the crown jewel of the Canadian Rockies that season. Thankfully, not having a calving glacier over top of it, definitely avalanche producing slopes above it, but man, the ice looks so good. I'll get back into my reading now. So direct that a first grader would point to it. You should climb here. More milk, please. My ski poles rattled inside my gloves. At 1 p.m., we skied under the incredible east face of Mount Babel, it looking so much like a human hand commanding halt. So steep, so overbearing, so long, 2,000 feet, yet overlorded by the 3,500-foot east face of Mount Fay just to the south. This is the east face of Mount Fay here. Up valley, we made out 2 climbers on Gimme Shelter and no one on the Jewel. Our gleeful hoots and yodels bounced off the valley walls. By 3 p.m., our base camp was established in the sparse timber lining the far eastern shore of the Upper Consolation Lake. We skied off to check out the Jewel. My dear friend David Cheeseman died attempting the Hummingbird Ridge on Mount Logan in 1987. Now Rollo, Steve, and I contoured over a moraine that David, Carl Tobin, and I had crossed in February of 1984 during the first ascent of the east face of Mount Fay. I looked up and remembered David, felt the heat of his heart like the root were alive, part of his bloodline, a trace of him left on the snow and on the rock and on the ice. I saw myself at 24, and I remembered the fire that burned in me then for these mountains. And I was amazed yet by how badly I wanted then. And I shivered, recalling the cold and the storm and the 4 days that we strived up the face, the cornice that hit us on the second day, that screaming sky, the smack that knocked me breathless and bruised my left shoulder blade badly, the hypothermia that haunted me for the last days, my down bag like clotted damp or frozen dumplings, completely dead, the brilliant climbing, the bond between Carl and David, Carl handing me a gem on the last day on the face when I wailed frustrated and futile profanity into the crap-sucking storm. Hey man, it don't gotta be fun to be fun. Good memories, moments that sustain my soul yet. The grandeur of the Jewel grew as we skied. It reared up like God's own totem pole, Jack's beanstalk, 1,000 feet of challenge, near mythical in its linearity. The first pitch looked like a series of glass wind chimes tacked to the black rock by their tops only and draping down for body lengths to form fragile and translucent panes of ice that did not touch the rock behind and therefore were not bonded to the rock behind. Anxiety rose in my throat as I tried to gauge the size of the features. If the panes were the size of my leg, they'd probably break when we tried to climb them. Without ice, the rock could prove to be featureless and unprotectable. And we were true alpinists who had read Benatti and believed. We did not include expansion bolts in the rack. Leaving our skis, we punched up closer to the pitch, and I saw that the first span of ice was as wide as a door, and my throat relaxed, and I scampered on up, all awash in excitement. We decided that Steve and I would stay and fix the first pitch while Rollo descended to camp and made dinner. I'd come to know when Farm Boy was having a hard go of it. His breathing becomes raspy and rhythmic and sounds like a handsaw chewing through a plank. It is his mantra. And he deals with fear and fatigue by focusing on it. And when he is in that place, he rarely speaks. On the first 50 feet, I saw Steve's feet skate free from the ice twice. And when he finally pulled into a stable hang atop the first bulge, it the size of a beach ball, he looked down to me and shouted, "Was that steep enough for you, Mr. Blanchard?" A rare cry of braggadocio from a man who normally presented humility. Yeah, and most climbers cheat the slide by making it look steeper than it is by tilting the camera. I had the camera in this shot tilted the wrong way. You can see the true vertical hang is here with the equipment. So I've actually made this look a lot less steep than it is. And really, that's the steepness there. It is plumb vertical and mildly overhanging, and it's thin, and it's really super challenging climbing. Steve climbed out of view, breathing and focusing. I heard the heartwarming ring of a solidly pounded piton, and I relaxed some and continued to pay out rope. In time, I dangled a weighted sling at arm's length to establish a plumb line, and I saw that the first 40 feet of the pitch stepped out in a series of 1 inch to 4 inch thick ice curtains 10 degrees past vertical. Holy moly, I gasped. I dropped my arm and gazed out along the snow bands of the east face of Mount Fay, buttressed and bordered by cliffs of Rockies limestone and horizoned against a broken sky above the lush rolling green timber below. The road a faint line way out there, the ski hill smaller still. An hour later, Farm Boy was anchoring and I was shivering, excavating 3 knife blades, 2 stoppers and a cam, and then focusing them to a master point consumed another hour. I wrapped to the end of the excess rope and down climbed to the snow and ran uphill and downhill to warm up. Farmy wrapped to me and we skied to base camp. Rollo had a story to tell. The Gimme Shelter party had come upon Rollo while he was crouched down and gathering water from a small swale at the head of the lake. "What are you doing here?" exclaimed Rob Owens, a local young keener, aghast at finding another soul in the valley. "Oh, hello, I am trying to climb that thing," Rollo replied, rising to his feet and pointing to the jewel. Rob's head jerked to the jewel. Farmy and I could be made out on the first pitch. "Who are those guys?" wailed Rob. "That's Barry and Steve," replied Rollo. "Oh man, my friend Eamon is going to be bummed. He's coming in here to try that line with Raph tomorrow." The plot thickened, for unbeknownst to us, Rob and partner skied away and shared the situation with Raph and Eamon, who were bedded down in a cook shelter at the Moraine Lake 2 miles down valley. The race was on. Eamon suggested starting immediately. Rob skied out and drove to Canmore and actually considered not sleeping and coming back in. So much wanting, so many breaking dreams. Rollo fired up the stove at 3 a.m. the next morning, and we skied away at 4 a.m. Rollo, being just about as fit as they come, soon outdistanced Farm Boy and I. Towards the base of the route, I had to shake my head because I swore I glimpsed a second light just downslope from Rollo's. Another team? Couldn't be. Must be Rollo's light reflecting off of a block of snow. Yet the light looked all bluish, like light filtered through ice. Or like one of those fancy new LED headlamps. And there it was again. Holy crap, it was another party. And they were turning on their headlamps intermittently, stealthily, trying to scoop us. It had to be Eamon and Raph making their play. Ahead, Rollo had realized, okay, now we are racing. And he put his head down and kicked into overdrive. And just like in your dreams, Rollo was the horse that you had money on, and he strided out and left the rest. I chugged on, trying to think up a climbing system that would accommodate 5 first ascensionists. But the jewel was just too narrow and too much of a fall line. I couldn't see 5 of us at any of the stances working. One team following another would mean a lethal pummeling for the lower team. I could find no win-win solution. In the beam of my headlamp, Eamon looked like someone who had just stepped from a hot tub into the dead of winter. Steam wafted from him, and sweat glazed his face and dripped from his hair and off of his chin. Who is that guy? Eamon asked Eamon. We tried to catch him, and I laughed and said, oh man, that's Rollo. You can't catch Rollo. He's got the Alex gene. He's uncatchable. So, yeah, Alex Lowe, just so fit, so strong. Rollo, probably aerobically as fit and as strong as Alex. And you don't come across many climbers that fit in this lifetime. Anyways, Steve arrived and met Eamon and Raphael and said that he'd always thought that they'd meet in a wild place like this and that it was appropriate. Raph and Eamon bowed out gracefully, and being gentlemen, they lent me their cell phone to call my wife to let her know that we were all okay. Rollo had already T-blocked the first pitch. We'd taken the wee rope clamps, T-blocks, to save on weight, but concluded that they suck for full rope ascents because, despite decent technique on our part, the ropes took a shredding. And they were brand new half ropes, and that hurt. We concluded that Jumars were worth the wait. The pitch was a dangling enchainment of frosted glass shower curtains and sea green bulges the size of bowling balls. Half of the gear was on rock, and at one point, Farmy had climbed behind a sapphire pillar, round as a telephone pole, so that the rope passed behind it and the pillar itself protected him. Crafty Farmy, smart Farmy. At the anchor, we decided that it must be Water Ice 7, because even though Rollo and I hadn't climbed it, we'd gotten fully pumped T-blocking it. Leaving Steve's belay, I stepped down and traversed left to gain thicker ice, the line. I tapped holes through the curtain and hooked my picks into them, and it all vibrated and sounded like glass chimes, like broken glass tinkering down brass bells. I felt if I gave the ice a good smack with the broadside of my axe that the whole curtain would fracture in lines and fall away. I stepped my crampons onto any feature because the thought of kicking the thin curtain scared the bejesus out of me. 15 feet out, I found a good cam and grabbed the edge of a curtain, and it felt like a surfboard in my hand as I laid away from it. The next 30 feet were unprotectable and terrifying, and towards the end, I was in a race with my exhaustion and my need to stay quiet and not break the ice. And with the panic that was rising in me, I needed to be at the bulge of blue ice 7 feet above me. That ice might be anchored to the rock there, and I needed to be there now because I was on the verge of falling. My heart pounded, and if my breathing is a mantra, it is the mantra of the enraged bovine bull pawing the ground. The bulge was, of course, overhanging, and I fluttered towards it twice and retreated, and my body shook like, well, take a butter knife, clamp the blade flat between the heel of your hand and the top of a table, now strum the handle. That's what my body felt like. I stuck the bulge and quaking drilled in a half believable screw. Then I suggested that I come down while I was still alive and that farm boy lead this pitch. I don't know what I could do up there that you can't, Bubba, Steve started. I'm losing my mind up here, man. I think that I'm going to fall. You look fine from down here, Bubba. You are controlling it. And Rollo added in his charming Argentine accent and diction, yes, Bubba, you look good. No? With that pep, I sucked it up and continued. The climbing remained fragile and steep. 20 feet higher, I found a good crack in the rock. The crack was a yard long and solid, and I stitched in 4 lovely pieces of protection and fluttered on. At 35 meters, I anchored to rock and ice under a small overhang, and it was the only place that I could see to stop. Rollo and Steve seconded, carrying our 2 small day packs. The packs weighed about 20 pounds each and held between them 3 belay jackets, a titanium stove and pot, 2 200 milliliter gas canisters, cup of soup, goo, spare gloves, headlamps, a tissue paper thin guide's tarp, a shovel blade, and 6 liters of water. We graded the pitch water ice 6, and after the ascent dubbed it the psychological crux of the route because of the fragility of the ice and the threat of the whole curtain collapsing. Hanging tight under the roof, my stomach hurt fiercely, and I feared that my anxiety had given me an ulcer. Rollo cut through the bull when Farmy and I, observing good climbing etiquette, began handing him the lead gear. Oh no, we should not even play this game. Steve should lead. No? The edge of the overhang had concentrated the ice into a corner, and Farmy stepped out onto what we assumed would be easier ground, and it was water ice 6. A catwalk of snow trisected the jewel atop our 3rd pitch, and we all enjoyed being out of the steeps for a stance. An incredulous Rollo informed Steve and I that he was getting biceps cramps, and the last times his biceps had cramped was in the early 90s when he climbed the nose on El Capitan in under 6 hours and led every pitch. Farmy pulled on to another water ice six-ish pitch. The seconding was knackering, and Rollo and I took to alpining it. We hooked our picks into all the carabiners and screw eyes, and we did that absolutely shamelessly. And it really didn't help that much because there were precious few ice screws on the pitch. Leaving the next anchor, Steve said, someone else is going to have to lead the next pitch. I'm getting tired. Like condemned men, Rollo and I exchanged glances, rife in fear and dread. Far above us, dusty clouds tumbled over the mountain like so many giant balls of sage. Flurries of graupel rained down on us, and we were sporadically inundated in spin-drifting waves of the stuff. Felt like truckloads of sand being dumped over our bowed and cowering and mortal heads. Like a slow-moving ghost, the afternoon sun had labored through the gray sky and passed beyond our horizon. Rollo and I had wrestled into belay jackets and were watching Steve bridge onto an emerald green dagger when the air around us shook with the growing roar of an avalanching snow mushroom. Hack! Watch out, I screamed. I didn't say heck, actually. Above and left of us, a shrieking white mass impacted the wall and exploded into a barrage of chalk-colored cannonballs and plaster shrapnel. I lunged into the mountain, Rollo too. Steve disappeared in the mist and fallout of the hit. Chunks smacked in close to us. Thankfully, none hit us. Experience has shown me the face of man bombarded, and Rollo looked like that. His irises completely surrounded by white like a fried egg, jaw slack and just beginning to quiver faintly. That was just too freaking close, Barry. I think we should get the frick out of here, Rollo exclaimed. Yeah, man, I think that you're right. Rollo and I were freaked, and we shared that with Steve, shouting back and forth over the 80 feet between us. Steve pointed out that he was in no position to add to the decision-making process, bridging as he was between two vertical ice flows. I'll come down if you guys want me to, but right now I have to move and keep climbing. So it was left to Rollo and I to invent the logic that allowed us to continue. If one more comes down, we're out of here. Largely due to prayer, no other projectiles screamed from the sky that day. I teetered onto the last blue pillar of the lower ice features. It was huge and thick and proper. At 50 feet, the ice planed past vertical, and I entered my buffalo breathing mantra. Soon I was quivering from the effort. 10 feet higher, I was losing control, and I desperately fumbled to sink a screw, then to clip my quaking ass into hang. It was a compromise of the free climbing ethic, but it kept me from falling, and I realized that my survival ethic trumped all. 20 feet higher, I crested over the lower ice system and ran the rope out to a sheltered rock anchor tight to the left wall of the amphitheater I'd climb into. Arriving at my anchor, Farm Boy stated, "You did a good job on that pitch, Bubba." Confirmation of the pillar's difficulty and approval of my tactic. More pep. Bold blue ice cleaved the rock over our heads, but above that lay acres of evil avalanche terrain. Our plan was to transfer to a far less threatened gully left of us. Rollo grabbed the rack and got after the snow-covered rock. Farmy did his magic for another 2 pitches of glassy green ice, and then it was dark and we were into the snow climbing. Rollo led off by headlamp. Midnight, the air cracked with cold. Rollo brewed, I shivered and belayed Farmy while he used our shovel blade to dig an honest to God, shoulder to over the head deep trench through the utter crap faceted snow topping our gully. "Can you believe this goddamn guy?" exclaimed Rollo as he and I shuffled up the trench on freshly excavated limestone. At 3 a.m., I clung to the cold and dark edge of Mount Fay. I was 165 feet above Rollo and Steve, and I could not make out the features ahead. I felt that I was balanced on the border of the world, and that just one false step would pitch me churning into the void. I climbed back down to Farm Boy and Rollo. By 4:30 a.m., Rollo had carved us out a snow cave, and we waddled in and draped the guide's tarp over the door behind us. We all sat on our packs and brewed cup of soup. Soon all 3 of us passed out with our heads slumped to our knees, just like bums in front of a fire, except we had no fire. We'd been climbing for 27 hours. We dozed for an hour and a half, then brewed tea, and at 7 a.m., we climbed into the new day. The air was icy, and my first draw on it set my lungs into shock, just like I'd leapt into frigid water. Ice crystals sequined the air, and the dawn lit them up as sparkling jewels. The sun felt so good, and I pushed on through 3 more rope lengths. The snow was horrid. Useless, vile, wee, unbonded crystals that provided about the same resistance as meringue. We all wrestled from the pits many times and left a perforation of craters along the ridgeline that looked like a giant connect the dots, an anaconda. At 10,000 feet, it became too ridiculous, even for men of vision and desire like us. The summit ridgeline lorded over us 500 feet above, but we were just not going to get there. We floundered. We failed in creating the alpine route we had envisioned. on our knees to keep from plunging through the paper mache crust. We rappelled to the incredible Quadra Glacier. In any other normal year, we would have down climbed this terrain. The glacier sits atop a massive rock shelf fully 2,000 feet above the valley floor, and it looked to me like a massive light white landing strip suspended in the sky. We traversed to its south end, walking over top of Gimme Shelter and feeling strange in the knowledge that the route and all its difficulty lay far under our feet. The gully we descended below Biden Mountain is threatened by seracs, and we dawdled not, bum sliding and rappelling in a haste accentuated by the fear of a serac collapse. 36 hours after leaving our camp, we shuffled back into it. Rollo suggested skiing out immediately, but Farmy and I told him to get stuffed. Rollo accepted this well, and subsequently I won the argument on bivvying out underneath the tissue tarp, leaving Rollo the pleasure of sharing the tent with Farm Boy. At dawn, we skied into the new day and away from Mount Fay. It had been a grand adventure in the company of good men, and all things considered, the hardest ice climb I've ever done. And later, around my kitchen table, we decided to name the ice climb that we created Sans Blitz. Deep in the dark reaches of my black little heart, a fresh ember smoldered to life. Perhaps one day in the future, Rollo, Blitz, Farmy, and I could return and push the route to the ridgeline and maybe even the summit. Avec Blitz. So, yeah, get out of my screen share here. And I believe Bill is coming back on to talk to you all a bit more. And yeah, I'll see some questions over on Facebook Live. Cheers, y'all. And thanks so much.
Hey, Barry. Just want to say thank you very much. It's so nice to hear those stories, particularly Raphael, who's also a big supporter of this event. And his presentation is actually tomorrow night. And of course, Rob Owens has been here. And so we really appreciate everything you do for our festival. And you're such a good friend. And I wish you success on this next book. And I know there's a couple of questions I've been watching them come in about when can we get this book and can we pre-order it. So once again, everyone that has tuned in, we've had a great audience tonight. Go on, put your questions on Facebook, and Barry will head on over there. So just a reminder, Raphael Solinsky, tomorrow night, we're going to talk to him a little bit about that Stanley Headwall project he just completed. I think it should be pretty exciting to tune in there. And it's our first ever Michigan Ice Festival presentation on a Sunday night. So once again, everyone, thank you for tuning in. And Barry, stay in touch, and hopefully we'll see you back here really soon.
Yeah, brother. Take care.
Yep. Thank you.